This is the age-old battle that you and I are engaged in of good versus evil. It's never changed. The battle has been engaged since they left the garden. It has been the same battle, and it just keeps getting more difficult because now our founders, who were Christian, they created a Christian-based nation. And I come from the People's Republic of Minnesota that has been so managed by criminals. They're criminals. They lie, they cheat, and they steal. And by the way, they let immigrants who come to this country not wanting to assimilate lie, cheat, and steal from them, our money. Guess what? There is nothing racist about calling out a criminal. So when I say that it's time. It's time. I mean, this is what they do in the great state of Minnesota. You know, our culture, that Scandinavian culture. By the way, I better make it clear before I go any farther. Minnesotans, are there any here? Ah, good. Then let me just say, okay, well, born, you're wearing that hat. You must be from northern Minnesota, the Iron Range. No, probably closer to Iowa. No, I'm going to leave that alone. The reason I bring it up is because I tell people regularly, Minnesota did not create passive-aggressive behavior, but we did perfect it, okay? And I happen to be more on the aggressive side, which doesn't always work in Minnesota, as Ralph will tell you. You know, sometimes Minnesotans are so afraid that you're going to call us a racist, you're going to call us an Islamophobe, you're going to call us some name that we just don't want to get into that fight. You know what? I would argue that I never did care, but I am done being careful, even the least bit careful. And I don't really care where you come from, but if you come to this great country, you have to understand you're coming here to be an American. We celebrate everyone's culture. You're happy with that as long as you are an American. Celebrate your culture. I don't care. Italian, Polish, Somali, okay? But they don't assimilate. And if they don't assimilate, then they should go the hell back to where they came from. Sorry, Ralph. I know this is a family show. I can't help myself today.
Gotta love him. My man, whose people are from Ireland and Germany, talking about the Scandinavian roots. You nasty piece of work. You're a lovely little snot, aren't you? Loving him.
The thing that I'm tuned into, all the people like, yeah, and I saw a couple little like beige, almost brown faces and I'm like, yeah. Oh, this is a Christian nation. No, that's a lie. That's a lie.
Well,
that's
even if it were a Christian nation, he's no Christian. He's a fascist.
No,
he's a
that. But I mean, somebody needs to explain all of the Egyptian symbolism on our money and everything else for these Christians to. Why would they embrace the obelisk and the all-seeing eye? Why would they embrace the Latin? Latin that's on the contradictions that we sit in every day and don't call out, or that it has to do something to our DNA to be in hypocrisy every day and not address it.
It absolutely does. It does. It create. Well, I mean, you know, in order to have a collective identity, you got to engage in some creative destruction. So I don't have a problem with the myth making. After all, he said this started when we left the garden. Earth to Tom Hemmer. But it's okay. I'm saying I don't want to step on the toes of the people.
Don't mess up.
As literal, I ain't gonna do that. But I will say that though, it takes some creative destruction. Listen, mix it any kind of way you want. But when you mix it to exclude people, then we're gonna have to fight. And here's a bulletin to Tom Emmer. You're gonna lose, baby. Your little dying way. Listen, I want talk like that, man. Talk like that. That's the desperate talk of a dying way of life.
Yes.
They have no choice now. They got to drop it and just say, hey, rally around the flag. And what they're going to find out is they ain't got no troops, because ain't nobody in that auditorium going to bust a grape. And if they threaten to bust a grape, they're going to find out that people who may not have a political consciousness necessarily at a critical mass, but are clear about one thing, if nothing else, you going to keep your hands off me. And that's when they going to find out, like, oh, I didn't realize how many people don't like what I said. Yeah, you kept saying it to the point where somebody had to say, man, be quiet before we make you be quiet. And, you know, hey, it's beautiful. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about physical violence. I'm talking about political violence, though, in the form of the ballot box. Voting is a form of violence. It's a form of political violence. Just like people talk about politics is warfare without physical conflict. No. Politics is warfare, period. You can divide the types of warfare, but it's warfare. Tom is declaring political war. And that's beautiful. All there for it. You ain't got the troops, baby.
I mean, the lie was right there. You know, we are a country that celebrates different cultures, but you have to assimilate.
Right.
Right. How can I? And then what does assimilation look like? What does it look like? Do we not season our food? Do we not wash our legs? Like what assimilation is he asking us to do? What's the assimilation? Do we not read? Are we ignorant? Do we marry our cousins? Like, what are we doing?
Yes. I mean, he's Catholic, and that's fine. His parents are Catholic, and that's good. About a third of the United States Congress, between the House and the Senate, are Catholic, meaning they are overrepresented in some ways. A majority of the United States Supreme Court is Catholic, which means they are overrepresented in a lot of ways. And then what is Catholicism? Catholicism is the original European Christianity. That is an absolute vestige of colonialism, even as its roots are not European. They took the narratives, the stories, the ways of knowing of what we now call Christianity and shaped them to their political purpose. Pete Hegseth,
just point out one little thing. You know, the Bible says, "Call no man father." Right? There's a scripture. That's it. I'm just saying, like the contradiction again.
Oh yeah.
I have no one. You can have a direct line to God, right? Because Jesus died on that cross, so you can talk to God. But now we have to go into a confessional booth where we call a person father, and then that person gives us things to say to absolve us of our sins when Jesus died. Like the contradiction is right. It's
everywhere. Absolutely. Yeah. Set yourself up as an intermediary and leave 10% at the door for the shakedown. I'm sorry, the tithe. So so I mean it's fine. I mean, but the Bible also says well, I guess the New Testament is supposed to fulfill the old one, right? So just because you ain't supposed to be wearing clothes with cloth made from two different strands. I mean, it's all kind of stuff the Bible says. Got stones in there, all kind of stuff. But I mean, sure, you pick and choose. Nobody follows it down the line. The Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Odu Ifa, you name it. Confucianism, Taoism, I mean, they're all ways of knowing, attempting, at least ostensibly, to have us live better, to be better, but not as individuals. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not. Maybe Christianity is an exception, because after all, you're negotiating for eternal life. So I suppose that is the ultimate individual aspiration. So, I mean, in some ways, the worldview is so deeply contradictory that the best we can do is just say, hey, live and let live. That's it. I mean, live and let live. But Tom don't want live and let live. He want live and let die. To quote Paul McCartney and Wings, you want live and let die. Where do you think that animus comes from?
Fear. He gets up every day, looks in the mirror, aging like a banana.
Oh.
Has no depth of spirit, and he's angry about it. Everything about him that he's been told about himself is that contradiction is in the mirror every single day. You are not better, you're not smarter, you don't look good, you're not, none of the things. And so you look at your children and you see the same thing, and you're like, I have to overwhelm this with lies, or else in his mind, we will cease to exist, because it's always to them about erasure as they commence to erasing people. So they tell on themselves by how they move, right? You want to ban books and get rid of this and history and all of that. when you're really just afraid yourself of being erased, and nobody's looking at, nobody even paying, we don't even give a damn about you like that. Nobody cares. Live your life. Who cares?
Yeah,
But yeah,
live your life.
yeah.
Ain't nobody mad at you. Live your life and leave everybody alone to live their lives, but you just keep interfering. Yeah, fear. That makes a lot of sense.
And the obsession, because again, if I'm not thinking about somebody, I'm not thinking about you. But here they come. Every place we are, here you come. Go back to it. We're not where you are. You self-segregate. You don't ever have to see a black person, a Somalian, a Muslim. You never have to see anybody because y'all build these cul-de-sacs and these whole towns. You got Utah. Y'all all moved to Utah, North and South Dakota and Montana. You don't ever have to see us. But yet, anytime we build something, here you come. So make it make sense. You know, either we're a problem. If we're a problem, I would think you would stay away from it, right?
You would think. I mean, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have the same basic equipment as a species. And, you know, whether we want to or not, it is an objective fact that we are Tom Emmer's parents. And so, you know, wherever his ancestors migrated to out of Africa and adapted geographically, fine. But you're not the parent, Tom, you're the child. And so you don't know that, and we don't know that, and it doesn't really matter in the larger scale of things, but we all have the same basic equipment. So when you say, here you come, I think that's absolutely correct, because you never left. I mean, I suspect that if we were to follow Tom Emmer around for a 48-hour period with a recorder, we would see some things that would contradict what he said out his mouth there at the Faith and Freedom Coalition meeting that's going on right now in DC the last several days. Another white nationalist rally. I feel sorry for them non-whites who were sitting there, the American Negro sitting there, because at any moment they turn on him. It doesn't matter what he does, who he loves, who he marries, it doesn't matter. But that desire in the deepness of our being doesn't know race. I don't think Tom Emmer would want to be held to account for everything he's done in his life, including perhaps professions of love or desire, or, you know, midnight trips to, I mean, hey man, let's follow you around for 48, just straight 48, you know, without you knowing we followed you around. And then let's just roll back the footage and watch Tom Emmer's whole demeanor change. I mean, but you know, the leader of that group he was speaking before, and he name checked him there, was Ralph Reed. Can you believe Ralph Reed's still slipping around? He the founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. I know you've written about him, I'm sure, over the years when he was, what was it? I can't remember. Christian Coalition. Oh, it's Christian Coalition, right? Wasn't it? Ralph Reed was the head of the Christian Coalition. And he's still around because these billionaires know if you pump money into these hate mongers, you can distract people enough for you to keep stealing. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. So our friend. So here we are. Juneteenth was a couple of 10 days ago.
I don't know if I said good morning to you, so I just want to make sure.
Good everything to everyone.
Okay, I want to make sure. And on the notion of parents and children, you know, even that, like, there's elder abuse going on. Then we're being
500 years of it. 500 years of it.
No, file a claim or something. Damn, it's crazy.
You know, y'all know that we don't go through our conversations in advance, and so everybody's going to swear that we do. And
no, actually, he comes in literally a minute before, and I'm like, I said, I'm about to call. No time to talk.
No, but what? Well, I'm saying right, but I'm saying that because we could not more be on the same page. We're on the same word, in the same line, in the same paragraph, on the same page. Because when you said that, you didn't know that while the Faith and Freedom Coalition are meeting here, and the next 250 rally is today, Tiffany Lofton and them are downtown. I think I'm gonna go down there when we leave here. That also the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America is in town. And so when you said that, you know, oh, this is all, yeah, we're gonna talk about reparations. Now I know y'all don't believe that but we understand we can't not be, because we're talking about the same. It's so funny. It's divine order. It's divine order. We're in that liberation corridor. You heard Prof say it. The 2-week liberation corridor between Juneteenth and White Juneteenth. Now, people often, I've heard when I've said that, people say, well, why would you call the United States Independence Day White Juneteenth? Because they said that, and they meaning Jefferson, Washington, Ben Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, the crew, the ones you've come to worship, your Lord and Masters. I'm being ironic, tongue in cheek. Well, I don't know, maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda. Anyway, I'm not sure. But anyway, again, blackface, brownface minstrelsy is something we still got to work our way through. You can't rehabilitate those enslavers, those human traffickers, as Ishmael Reed kind of challenges you to do about, in his play, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda. Brilliant brother, but playing around with those human traffickers can prove to be a nasty proposition, particularly when people start singing the songs and next thing you know, they see themselves in Hamilton. If it's elder abuse on one side in terms of the children, what is it when the parents start behaving like the children? Anyway, that I think that's actually a nice, I think, way to describe Hamilton, parents dressing up like the children. But at any rate, the wayward children at that. It's kind of cringeworthy when you see an elder dressed up like a child. But, in this process, this liberation corridor, when I call it White Juneteenth, it's because you had a polity of people made up of people who were not from the same places, whose ancestors had come, a great many of them from England, but also some from France, also a few from Spain, a congealing that Tom Emmer might say assimilated into 13 colonies, and particularly those southern colonies were colonies that, and we call them colonies because they were people living where in all of those places. We talked extensively about Ken Burns in his most recent documentary, The American Revolution, where he talks about these various civil wars taking place in the North, what became known as the North American continent. But they came together principally at first around one common objective: to separate themselves from their colonial parent. So they declared independence July 4th, 1776. And they were in the throes of a war against England. And they had recruited into it various elements. We won't go through all this. We're here now for 329 consecutive weeks. And so, you can go back and look at how we've talked about everybody from Theodore Kosciuszko, who has all these monuments in Philadelphia and other places. You can talk about the Polish, you can talk about the French, you can talk about the Spanish, you can talk about the other countries who, and entities and polities that had a stake in the formation of the United States of America. So fast forward to June 19th, 1865, when the descendants of trafficked Africans in Texas were alerted to the fact that in a war measure signed in September 1862, Abraham Lincoln, the then president of the United States, said as of January the 1st, 1863, those who were held captive in territories and states that are in rebellion to the United States, which means it didn't apply to Maryland, it didn't, apply in those places that did not leave the Union, would be thenceforth now and forever free. And of course, between January 1st, 1863 and June 19th, 1865, the 13th Amendment had been proposed and passed, freeing everyone, restricting captivity to those who committed a crime. There's many ways to narrate the 13th Amendment. To talk about it as a granting of absolute freedom is to misquote the 13th Amendment. But by the time that message of quote unquote freedom reaches these Africans in Texas, the Africans in most of the other places had been alerted. And again, after June 19th, 1865, as we have talked about many times before, won't go into now. If you want to go back last week, you can get the citations from the places previous to last week, where we've talked about Juneteenth extensively. we know that one of the things, and Gerald Horne writes about it in the Counter-Revolution of 1836, that it still took many months into, in fact, the next year for certain forms of captivity to end in Texas, and in many ways, certain forms of subjectivity continue to persist in Texas. But at the heart of Juneteenth, just like at the heart of White Juneteenth, July 4th, 1776, and I know 1865 is after 1776, but is it, again, we're using ways of knowing, which think about past, present, and future as a convergence. It means you got to know about the past. You got to sit in the present and know about what's going on now. So in many ways, your vision is informed by your memory and your experiences. So those things kind of converge. So I know one comes before the other, but at the same time, calling July 4th, 1776, White Juneteenth, I don't think that's any different than referring to something that has happened before something else as a projection of something else. After all, I suppose it'd be no different than calling, in some ways, Harriet Tubman a feminist. Somebody's head exploded. I pointed to my friend and colleague, Lethea Watkins, who would talk about how you back map ideas in history in order to bring them into your framework. So, or for example, to say that David Walker was fighting for democracy. I don't know. I guess that wouldn't work because the Greeks proceed. Anyway, let me not go back down there. I'm coming up out of the footnote into the main point. The idea of White Juneteenth, for me, allows for a common framework then to emerge. We can talk about the same things using the same language. So, as I said in a little 5-minute interview on ABC Evening News last weekend, on Juneteenth, actually, on Juneteenth, that Friday, the Confederacy, most directly, I would say by extension, all the white people who would like to have you subjugated, but just to be polite about it, the United States Confederacy in 1865 was to the trafficked Africans in 1865 what England was in 1776 to the 13 colonies. And as you read the Declaration of Independence, they're saying, when in the cause of human events comes time for one group to separate from another group, sometimes it gets a little nasty, gets a little violent. By then, they had been fighting for years. But the point was that we got to separate from you and start our own government. And in fact, it's our human right. It's our natural right, as Jefferson and his co-drafters put in the Declaration of Independence. Well, it's no different in Juneteenth. Oh, the paper says we're free. Well, I always knew in my heart I was free. But now that I got some paper to back it up, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate from you. So when you look at the history of Juneteenth, it is a history of Black self-determination. Where in the hell does John Henry Yates and them other three ministers get some money together to buy the land that becomes Emancipation Park, where they have the Juneteenth celebrations in Houston? Well, where they started, now they're everywhere. But the point is, they figured out ways to self-determine. What we want, as Fred Douglass said, is leave us alone. And yet, to quote Karen Hunter from this morning, here you come. What do you want? Well, we want your labor, man. You weren't just property, you were a capital asset. You were producing wealth for us. We can't just let you leave, Rosewood. We can't just let you leave, Greenwood, Tulsa. We can't just let you leave all those all-Black towns in Oklahoma, or those sections of white places, whether it be Washington, D.C. or New York. We can't just let you leave Central Avenue in Los Angeles. We can't just let you leave the bottom in Philadelphia or Nashville. We can't just let you leave. We need your labor. And I want your stories. To quote the Irish vampire from Sinners. Tom, remember, you've seen that, right? Because you come from the Irish, so you must know those people. I want your stories. Anyway, the point is this. We can't just let you leave. See, England had to let the United States go, in part because there's a configuration of countries around England who they are also beefing with from time to time, and they got to make sure that those people don't jump in on the side of the United States, because they too have interests. Remember, France, at that time of the U.S. Revolution, has nominal control over the middle part of the economy of the continent, the North American continent, because they've claimed it. Now, that's going to change thanks to the Haitians in 1804. But then, they're against England too. They sitting out trying to see who's going to win this. Maybe we're for you, maybe we're against you. But my point is this. the 13 colonies of the United States had international support, also international eyes on them, and they were not against human trafficking. In fact, it was the capital asset that allowed them to have 13 British colonies on the seaboard in the first place. So I'm saying all that as a background to say white Juneteenth for me is a very appropriate way to frame July the 4th, because it allows us to have common language, and then we can begin to pursue the underlying meanings of these spaces. And so it is quite fortuitous for us every year, especially this 250th anniversary of the birth of the criminal enterprise called United States of America, beginning with those 13 British colonies, to use the 2-week corridor, to use the corridor between June 19th and July 4th as a space for us every year to evaluate opportunities to become better here in the United States and beyond, to evaluate objectives and rituals for enforcing or even reinforcing collective identity. See, I hesitate using that prefix we. I'm sorry, we too, but re. I hesitate because doing something presumes you did it in the first place. That's why, people say, well, I've researched. Really? Did you search the first time? Because research means you examine something and you come back to check your examination or to extend your examination. At least I don't want to get too deep into these kind of word meanings, but just think about that. You said, well, what did you do? Did you use the search engine? Yeah. Did you use the research engine? You don't say the research engine, you say the search engine. I searched for this. Okay, well, good. So similarly with reinforcing collective identity begins with enforcing collective identity. And that's what rituals do. Rituals the first time enforce collective identity. Here's what it means for you to be a member of our biological family. Here's what it means for you to be a member of our extended community. Here's what it means to be a member of this school community or this church or mosque or synagogue community. Here's what it means to be part of a community called Knarrative, or community every week called In Class, we're called. You're a member of the community. That enforcement can be external or internal. If you are right now in this space because a parent or an adult or an elder or a friend or a comrade has said, hey, watch this. That's a form of coercion. It could be pleasant coercion. It could be, okay, I don't mind. And then there's the belonging that you make by choice. I came here, I'm here because I want to be. I feel like I need to be. I feel better being here. Again, every day I leave this space, I encounter another beautiful soul, many beautiful souls who are here with us, with the rest of us. And to everyone here who I've seen over the last 7 days, I want to say thank you for stopping. Thank you for saying hello, whether it be on the train from DC to Philadelphia, whether it be at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, which I'll talk about in a moment, whether it be at the University of the District of Columbia, where I was yesterday for a moment or two, whether it be the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, whose conference was yesterday, started Thursday, and will continue tomorrow. My friends and comrades, wherever it was, or just on the metro, or walking up down Georgia Avenue, or over at Sankofa, or just random encounters anywhere. Coming into the Washington Nationals game to get that Homestead Grays jersey Monday before last, and the elder who was checking bags, hey, watch out now, I'm watching you. I said, oh, good, I'm watching you. He said, y'all keep doing what y'all doing. So that is a community of choice. That's a ritual of collective identity that is enforced from within. But the combination makes a collective. There is no nation called United States of America in the strict sense of the use of the word nation, from the Latin nasi, to be born of a common experience, of a common foundation, to have that common language and culture. You could make the case that it is a nation, and I'm very open to having that conversation. But I want to hear your reasons for saying it is a nation, because I will give you my reasons for saying it is not, and then we have the conversation. But it got to have some common language to begin that conversation. It's a state with a lot of different nations in it. You become a nation through commitments that you must evaluate from time to time, lest the rituals ossify, lest the rituals calcify, lest the rituals become less an inclusive element of enforcement or reinforcement and more coercive element. You don't even know why you waving that red, white, and blue flag, other than they gave you one on the street and the parade's going by, and you want a sparkler and you want to watch the fireworks later. But if you got pressed about it, you would either say, I don't know much about this flag. I know that the stars represent states, and I don't know what these stripes, I know they represent something. It has something to do with George Washington. Yeah, those are the 13 colonies. Oh, yeah. Things that we of a certain age might take for granted, things that if you get below a certain age, you may never have heard, even in school. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I started to say something that I have not said in public in many years, and that I certainly have not said in a collective ritual in decades. But I suppose I should say the first line or two of it, because, other than having had to commit it to memory in school, not in church, not at home, but as a form of coercive collective identity, I suppose that most of us probably learned in school. Perhaps many of us didn't learn at home, but I didn't, thank God. It was I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one, whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to go any further. I've already said too much. But when you heard Tom Emmer call Minnesota the People's Republic of Minnesota, I just started laughing, because I'm thinking about the People's Republic of Brooklyn. There's a Brooklyn in Minnesota as well. There's been state violence committed against African people in that little suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, called Brooklyn. But Tom Emmer means something different. He's trying to narrate a collective identity. At the same time, he's trying to coerce you into his narrow view of that identity. And for Tom Emmer, the 4th of July does not mean all of you. White Juneteenth does not mean all of you unless you assimilate. And even if you assimilate, it still doesn't mean all of you, because you can't change your skin color. Can you, Tom Emmer? But I like you, man. I like you the same way I like Eric Schmidt, the nasty piece of work, who's senator from St. Louis, who we played in a session in class where he was talking about assimilation. He said, if it belongs to everybody, it doesn't belong to anybody. I'm sure him and Tom Emmer agree on that. But a nakedly white nationalist U.S. federal administration is in place right now. Bozo is hurting, clearly physiologically, mentally. He's deteriorating, as we will all deteriorate before we go the way that Bozo will go too, and be recycled. Recycled. We all gonna die. Bozo is clearly showing deep signs of decline. And there is no compassion for him, because everyone who has a stake in him is using him for their purposes. There's a bevy of publications that have come out. Here's just a few of them. Now that we are right at I won't talk about this week's New Yorker. That's a different conversation. But this is this month's Atlantic, just came out. It's got in the mail. The battle hymn of the Republic is on the cover. They sending a message, and everybody got a story to tell. Look at the ad for Coca-Cola, as we call it in the South. America, so much has happened since we poured our first Coke in Atlanta in 1886. A lot of stuff happened before that too. But anyway, but one of the lead articles in this month's Atlantic is Yoni Applebaum, How to Tell the American Story. Finding a common history that's both unsparing and unifying has proved all but impossible in recent years. It shouldn't be. Well, Yoni, maybe it shouldn't be. And you can take out in recent years. Because as far as I'm concerned, the possibility of putting a common story together with the various stories that come into this place, it's about as absurd as black men playing for the New England Patriots in this story, The Rebellious Origins of American Sport. This is an interesting story there, written by Sally Jenkins. As silly as a black man playing with this white man with a football, looking like a soldier from the Revolutionary War on his side, the New England Patriots. But I mean, that's as silly having black men and women running up and down the court in Notre Dame with an Irishman doing like this at not Irishman, leprechaun, I suppose. The Nation magazine. This is the new one. This is from just came out. It's July, August. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. Thomas Paine. Who gives a damn about common sense? Thomas Paine. The common sense is I'd have been breaking your neck too to get out of captivity. But look at all the people, 250 years in search of a more perfect union. Is that what it's been in search of? Again, the coercive narrative. Our friend and brother, Reverend Dr. William Barber, in here on the Social Gospel. The good Congressman Jamie Raskin on the Constitution, constitutional law scholar, just reelected to his congressional seat in Maryland. Jane Fonda on epic activism. Bob Reich, Robert Rice on economics. Amy Goodman on press freedom, Bill McKibben on environmentalism, Sarah Nelson on workers, Zohran Mamdani, that's an interesting name, on patriotism. Do you want to know what Zohran Mamdani said about patriotism? Nah, y'all don't want to know what Zohran Mamdani said about patriotism, do you? Yeah, I'm gonna hold you in suspense. Should I read something? No, I'm not gonna read. Should I read something? No, I'm not gonna read. Y'all want me to read what Zohran Mamdani said? No, you got Gerald Horne in here. Gerald Horne is writing on the contradictions of the American Revolution. Well, he has to write about the contradictions of the revolution. He's written whole books on the contradictions of the American Revolution. So you've got Tish James on voting rights, Vietnam Nguyen on American dreams, Bernie Sanders on fighting oligarchy, Pramila Jayapal on immigration, our friend Ellie Mistal on our rights, Martin Espada on Alligator Alcatraz. He got a bunch of other people, Dave Zirin, Zephyr Treachout, a lot of Bill Fletcher. My point is this, it ain't no one story. And, this is the time. Now, most people are not going to read this stuff. You should read all of it to the degree that you can, but they're not. That's why we're here week after week to at least let people know that it's there to be engaged and to think about, and also to reinforce the fact that there is no one story. But there's a nakedly white nationalist U.S. federal administration that's intensifying its assaults on a shifting global order. Bozo threatening Europe again this week with tariffs. Just bombed Iran again after claiming Iran broke the ceasefire. It ain't never been no ceasefire. BP, the international killer, will not allow it. Much less the violence that continues in the Caribbean Sea and in the Pacific Ocean at the behest of the runt rooster, Christo-fascist Pete Hegseth, and the others. The extrajudicial killings, the acts of state violence that amount to war crimes. So there's never been an end to the killing anywhere. And as we think about the killing, we understand the killing is a vital moment and point to reinforce the question of national identity, collective identity, U.S. identity, patriotism. In fact, there is, let me see here. This is this weekend's Financial Times. I'm going to come to another article, but I think if this is the second section, and I think it is the second section, the FT Long conversation, the lunchtime conversation they had this week, which just made me kind of laugh and cringe at the same time because I do know this paper well, is with, let me see, FT, yeah, here we go. It's with this guy. You know this guy right here? Prof, I know you remember. Most of y'all remember. Love some me, hate some me. Look at this. The founder of the controversial military contractor, Blackwater, is now a roving soldier entrepreneur with operations in Haiti and the Democratic Republic of Congo, two teams that played in the World Cup. Over steak at London's Mayfair, he tells Malcolm Moore about the history of mercenaries, the future of drone warfare, and why Trump was badly advised on Iran. You know this guy's face? Sure you know. His sister was the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. That is Eric Prince. Lunch with the Financial Times, Eric Prince. They keep it close in the family. What did Slide tell us? It's a family affair. It's a family affair. White nationalist mercenaries. It's a family affair. A nakedly white nationalist U.S. federal administration intensifies these assaults that have been in place forever. Not forever, 250 years in the case of the United States, half a millennia in the case of white nationalist global expansion. And in the case of Eric Prince and his friends, I would say most intensely over the last half century, since a series of white nationalist interests have slowly crept into position to capture the federal government and align their never-ending war against humanity with a federal apparatus that they have finally captured. Eric Prince, who at the height of his infamy would be drugged for filth by the same Financial Times, has now been rehabilitated, and he is practicing bleeding his swords, making his millions on the continent of Africa and in the Caribbean, among other places. But when they jump on the Russians for having mercenaries in Africa, oh my God, I know you didn't say that, Mr. Prince. You in the Democratic Republic of Congo protecting those parasites who are extracting material wealth in the form of minerals and precious resources out of the ground, and you're in Haiti, presiding over the same misery that drove Haitians. There are no more proud human beings on the face of the planet than a Haitian, drove them out of their country and into miserable waters like Springfield, Ohio. I'm sure, my friend, that your mercenary soldiers, patriots to the core, would be quicker to eat a dog than any Haitian. Maybe even their favorite dog. But either way, you mercenaries, you know what you'll find among his paid killers? More people with flag tattoos and I'm doing this as a patriot to anybody else, because these coercive collective identities, part of the collective assault on the world, is projecting forth this narrow white nativist, white nationalist notion of what it means to be have a fidelity to a higher ideal, and they wrap it in the term patriotism, and then they lie on the underlying reasons for that patriotism by saying that our patriotism is anchored in foundational ideals, our founding fathers, no mothers, and that's fine, because Abigail Adams, you guilty too. Martha Washington, you damn sure guilty, because you were the human trafficker of the couple. George Washington came to the marriage with very few assets. You the one had us captive, Martha. So you right with them. So we can say, for, the sake of quote unquote gender equity, founding mothers and fathers, they would say their founding ideals were democracy or free enterprise, whatever the hell that means. Their founding ideals were freedom, America, freedom. And so we should all aspire to those founding ideals, which is what makes this Nation magazine special issue so great to read. Because a lot of these people have been in fields with their shirts off. A lot of these people here would have been in fields with their shirts off, or being subject to sexual assault, perpetual sexual assault. And when you think about that domestic form, let me see. I have The Economist. Their latest issue came out too, but I'm not going to look for it, because again, they're all converging now. It's about to be July, and all the magazines, all the stuff is coming out, and so they're talking about this. In fact, in the books section of the Financial Times today, they reviewed 4 books. I haven't read all 4. I've got all 4, but I've read, I'd say probably about 60% in all of them. Reborn on the 4th of July. This is the essay. As the Declaration of Independence turns 250, 4 new books examine how its meaning has changed over time. This is Emma Stone McKinnon. The 4 books: The Long Revolution, Creating a United States After 1776. That's Nathan Pearl Rosenthal's book. It's around here somewhere. It came out in May. I started reading it, but it's a different read. Anyway, the other one that came out in May, Freedom Round the Globe, A World History of the American Revolution. This is Sarah Pearsall's book. Interesting, because Pearsall's book follows in the line of several, well, more than several, but for purposes of today, a handful of books that have come out in the last couple of years. There have been some that preceded that, but those were targeted at academics, and most of them were edited collections that put the U.S. Revolution in the context of what was going on around the world. And even they fail in terms of the whole world, so to speak. It's really usually the Western world, although the economic historians will do more beyond that, because of supply chains, because of the emerging, not markets so much as emerging places to go get the natural resources from. You'll see that. But in almost none of these texts, except for a gesture here and there, is the continent of Africa included as anything other than as a source of resources, human resources and natural resources, other natural resources. So freedom around the globe, a world history of the American Revolution is interesting to America, USA, how race shadows the nation's anniversaries. Seems like I know the guy who wrote that. Oh, yeah. It's our friend, right, Prof? Eddie Glaude. And then National Treasure, how the Declaration of Independence made America. Let's look at what they say about Eddie. Eddie Glaude's America, USA offers a different caution against taking an overly simplistic view of the American Revolution. Facts. Glaude, a professor of African American studies at Princeton, focuses on the doubleness of the United States, evident in the Declaration's later commemorations. To Glaude, the founding's legacies feature a core contradiction between ideas of an exclusive white nation and ideas of universal equality. If Reconstruction marked the beginning of a more peaceful period, it was, he argues, a quote, blood-drenched peace, end quote, as anti-Black violence rose and the U.S. Supreme Court rolled back the guarantees of equal protection under the law contained in the 14th Amendment. The 1926 sesquicentennial, in Glaude's view, was overshadowed by debates about immigration and the ascendant power of the Ku Klux Klan. The 1976 bicentennial came against the backdrop of the turbulence of the 1960s and fracturing support for social welfare. And it goes on. And it is an assessment of the value of the veracity of the text more than it is kind of summary. But my point is that we're at the second week in the corridor now, where all of this stuff is converging at the same time to explode. And there's going to be a lot of conversations. And none of the conversations we're going to see on TV are going to be as complex as the ones we see here in the popular Western-facing press, which is why we have an obligation between this week and next week to highlight these things, because next year we'll do something different and similar in the same rhythm of ritual and moment of reflection. But because people's attention spans have evaporated, if they were ever there, 250 is, for some, in many ways, arbitrary reason, the quantitative rendering of something that is no less potent in 251 or was no less potent in 249 than it was in 250. But for some quantitative reason of kind of coming together and creating some ritual reinforcement of collective identity, 250 gets people's attention in a way that 251 won't, that 249 didn't. It will always take our attention, because 2 weeks from now, we will still have the same intense focus on study and thinking that we have this week and we'll have next week, but we take advantage of people's attention to do this. So using our 250th moment, this nakedly white nationalist bozo administration, as intensifying its assault on both those shifting global orders we talked about for a moment and a rising domestic opposition to bozo. It's rising. And it isn't, as the news would say, commercial news, entertainment, mass media would say, simply because the price of eggs went up or the price of gas went up or people are worried about their pocketbooks. It isn't just that. To say it's just that is to ignore all of the various ways of living in the world that are contained in the borders of the United States of America, whatever those borders are. Because Eddie does quote Daniel Emmerhart, How to Hide an Empire. I'm not sure the United States has borders, but certainly doesn't aspire to having borders, except to exclude people. You don't want anybody to come here, but you want to go to Puerto Rico whenever hell you want. In fact, you want to go to the Dominican Republic. In fact, you want to go to Haiti to vacation. In fact, you want to go everywhere around the world. You just want people to come here. Guess what? They're already here. Sorry, Tom. But as I was saying, this idea of this domestic opposition should, this is a moment when it will become readily apparent to people that the opposition was already here. The opposition was always here. In fact, this was never a nation. Ken Burns, I got to give him credit. Burns creeps closer, probably because he has nowhere else to go after having examined all these subjects. He creeps closer and inexorably to this fact. It was never a nation. And if you want it to be something other than a polity struggling to keep itself together, you're going to have to give up the whiteness as central identity. The Tom Emners got to go. Tommy, you got to go, baby. And you will go. Politically, you won't be in power much longer. Or you will, but you'll be presiding over your house, your wife and children, like that kind of thing. You won't be in our way. Oh, trust on that. And what your friend Bozo is doing, who spoke at that same conference, by the way, Ralph Reed's Faith and Freedom Coalition here in DC, what your friend Bozo is doing is not being inventive or unique or different. He is simply an avatar for things that you have thought and felt and tried to implement for your whole life. Shout out to Stephen Miller for your whole life. Shout out to Russell Vokes for your whole adult life. Shout out to Kevin Roberts. Shout out to every one of the authors of Project 2025. This is what you all have always wanted. You got an avatar to push who is so vile, who is so disgusting, who's so interpretive, who is so violent in his rhetoric that the inner hatred and underneath that fear that you have finally has an avatar that can say the things that you didn't think you'd be able to say in polite company. So you don't get rid of him because you believe in everything he's saying. You don't even push back against the vile nature of it because late at night, you know that's how you feel too. You're scared. You're concerned. And you should be, because your little warrior of life is coming to an end. So you cling to the avatar. You don't tolerate his messiness. You don't tolerate his lies. You don't tolerate even his destruction. Whether it be the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial, or building an arch, ostensibly, going across to Martha Washington's former plantation, coming through with her granddaughter, the Custis family, Arlington National Cemetery. That's the kind of creative destruction that in your heart of heart you want. You want a strong man, just like some of the Germans in Nazi Germany. You want a strong man, just like some of the Italians under Mussolini. You want a strong man. You want a fascist. You know you do in your heart of hearts. And with him there, you don't have to say it. You can just sit back and revel in it. And when they come press you about it, you could pretend that, oh, yeah, no, that's just Trump being Trump. Or in the words of Tom Emmer, what'd he say? It's not racist to be a racist. Tom, you're a beautiful spirit, man. Loving you. Loving you, son. It's important. Just like any sickness, you got to reach the peak before you get past the peak. And you, sir, are at the peak of the fever, but the fever is about to break. So we use our Africana Studies Conceptual Category to examine these ritual moments, this corridor between Juneteenth and White Juneteenth, the conflicts between patriotism and foundational ideals. What does it mean to have foundational ideals that guide how you come together to live together? We go way past democracy. Way past democracy. Y'all can use that word if you want. I understand. I can have the conversation about democracy, even though it never existed in Greece and hadn't existed anywhere in the West. And to superimpose that word on people who didn't know that word and had ways of knowing and had governance formation and had ways of passing on movement and memory that in some ways were not as good as what you think ideally is democracy, in other ways were much better than what you think is democracy. To use that word to back map it, okay, fine. You use democracy, I'll use White Juneteenth. What would you call it, White Juneteenth? Same reason you use the word democracy. You going back in time to put a label on something. I'm going to go back in time and put a label on something. Let's have a common frame of reference. What we're not going to do is you do one thing and then say what I'm doing is wrong, even though when I start doing the same thing, you then want to have a visceral reaction. Why? Because common language removes the illusion of hierarchy. See, if you got a common language, if we're speaking a common language, now we're in full humanity and common conversation with each other. In fact, let's use that as one of the elements of what we might mean when we say we want liberation. I want to be my full self in the world, and you want to be your full self in the world. And as Sterling Allen Brown says, I want to be integrated, but I will be integrated with the root word integer. I'm coming in as my whole self. So let's have some common language here. What I'm not coming in as a piece of you, as a figment of your imagination, as having my memories be not my memories, but the memories you implanted in my head. And now I'm running around talking about our founding fathers, our democracy, our celebration of our independence. Imagine American Negro saying that July 4th, 1776 represents her independence from Great Britain. Imagine it. Just sit with that for a minute. When we separated from Great Britain, do I have to pull Gerald's the counter-revolution of 1776 off the shelf, or I just go to the Nation. Let's go to Gerald Horne for 5 minutes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Page 89 of the Nation magazine, Gerald Horne. Banquo's Ghost, the contradictions of the American Revolution. What Gerald says. He says that, let's see, I'm going to go to a cut line so we can just get right to it. Look, he said, Joseph J. Ellis is one of the most celebrated historians in the nation. A winner of the Pulitzer Prize and once the holder of an endowed chair at Mount Holyoke, he was hailed by the Washington Post as the most widely read scholar of the Revolutionary period and probably the most influential as well. His best-selling books on Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and other founders have sold hundreds of thousands of copies and have been instrumental in forging a remarkable consensus from left to right that sees July 4th, 1776 as a sacred date and a great leap forward for all humanity. But in his latest book, The Great Contradiction, The Tragic Side of the American Founding, Ellis reconsiders the essence of his oeuvre and this consensus, which is akin to the Pope reconsidering Catholicism. Go ahead, Gerald. Yeah, I can hear him saying it. Focusing, quote, on two unquestionably horrific tragedies the founders oversaw, the, quote, failure to end slavery and the failure to avoid Indian removal, end quote, Ellis seeks to understand how and why they happened. Quote, next to the failure to end slavery, end quote, he writes, quote, the inability to reach a just accommodation with the Native Americans was the greatest failure of the revolutionary generation, end quote. Charting not only the history of the Republic's founders, but also the history that preceded and followed them, he outlines what he terms as the, quote, great silence, end quote. For more than 4 centuries, the most important voices of the Western civilization remained mute as a highly organized program of unspeakable barbarity with genocidal implications flourished throughout Europe. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Aquinas, Erasmus, Locke, and all the Catholic popes regarded slavery and the slave trade as acceptable features of European society. You say, man, 30 years ago, back in the late 80s in Columbus, Ohio, we had our little radio show in Columbus called Free Your Mind, 10 o'clock Saturday mornings. Myself, the ancestor now, Troy Allen, Valencia Watkins, Brian Mawada Harris, Langston, Brother Langston Brown. We would come in for an hour on the radio and we would, say stuff like this, but we'd always put in what Troy used to call good white sources. Because you're not going to believe when a black person says, we're going to use a good white source. Joseph Ellis, good white source. You see how Gerald opened with his credentials. But then he goes on, Gerald writes, why has Ellis chosen at this late date to break from the pack of rationalizers and justifiers? It's almost 35 years ago. He says, the antics of the 47th U.S. president and his avid followers have clearly left him shaken. But more than that, they point to a pattern, an inherently paradoxical pattern, that racism surges only after some semblance of racial equality becomes foreseeable, which Ellis now believes runs throughout this nation's history. Ellis does not expand on this explosive point, but he concedes that the late Edmund Morgan, one of his mentors, got it right, particularly in his trailblazing American Slavery, American Freedom, which argues that these polar opposites were there from the onset, much like Macbeth and Banquo's Ghost. Ellis concedes the nation cannot evade the tragedy preordained at its founding. I'm going to skip through the article to the last paragraph. He says, I confess to being torn while reading Ellis's account. On the one hand, when a scholar of his eminence begins to raise searching questions about such a foundational matter, one is tempted to stand and cheer. On the other hand, I wish that Ellis had gone further in this slim volume. He goes on. He says, to his credit, by having the courage and wisdom to rethink his life's work, Ellis has provided a grand service to us all. Yeah, that's true. So Gerald is always generous, always kind of conciliatory, but he's never he doesn't waver from his foundational ideals. The ideal is the pursuit of full humanity in the world, to do no harm to other humans, to do no harm to nature, to live, to be liberated. To be liberated means not to oppress other things, other people. And so I appreciate what Gerald has said, but in that process, using this Africana Studies Conceptual Category, we want the same thing. And that means rejecting a trauma anchored identity, rejecting that as a basis for contesting oppressions of all forms. Meaning what? Don't start your identity with who has harmed you, because then when you are fighting to end oppression, you anchor it all around the harm that occurred, rather than sitting in your full humanity and saying, as a full human in the universe, in the world, in reality, I see these things that need to be corrected and these things to be uplifted. Gerald Horne is very generous in the nation in this article. But what does it mean to belong to a community? Belonging to a community, what that comes with is some ostensible guarantees of protection from harm. This will become a lot clearer in a moment, but we're in this corridor between Juneteenth and White Juneteenth, between a moment when people of African descent, descended from those who were trafficked, find themselves relieved from the burden in a social structure that created race and put them at the bottom of that racial hierarchy, relieved for a moment from complete assault, find a moment to gather themselves and begin to engage in the act of repair. Self-repair, self-healing. Let us build, let us gather, let us self-determine, let us move forward. Only to discover immediately and to this day that the foundations for the oppression that they encountered did not end on June 19th, 1865, did not end anywhere in the polity, didn't end anywhere in the hemisphere, but that the continuation of those oppressions, what Carter Woodson in The Miseducation of the Negro calls the sequels to slavery, those oppressions are all grounded in their racialization, persisted in different forms, sometimes the same form. So they had to continue to resist, but the resistance does not become their reason for existence. The resistance becomes a way of combating the suppression of their full humanity. Self-determination is the identity, is the experience, is the objective. But to anchor one's whole existence around the trauma only reinforces the trauma as their existence. It's a challenging thing for us. So White Juneteenth, 2 weeks later, becomes a reminder of the racialization. It's a trick bag. I think it's one of the reasons that my friend and brother Eddie Glaude so beautifully channels, evokes, is in conversation with the ancestor James Baldwin. But for me, Glaude and Baldwin are missing the point. You are not Black originally. You did not create that term. It was imposed from without. So to repair yourself requires a form of healing that's got to come from in here, not from negotiating with the terms that were imposed upon you. This is the space, the corridor, that 2-week corridor between Juneteenth and White Juneteenth, when we can consider what it means to be liberated and what it means to belong in liberation, in that liberation corridor. So the United States remains a contested social structure where these foundational white nativist missions can't be allowed to center these spaces where others are merely tolerated by degree of submission, like what the congressman said. You got to assimilate. I'm going to tolerate you as long as it's just your food. And even then, if I come in here and smell something I don't like, I'm going to say, you got to stop cooking that. If I don't like how you dressed, I'm going to say something. If I really do like it at midnight, but not at noon, I'm going to have to say out of my mouth, I don't like it at noon, even though you may see me sneaking back around here at midnight to see what you dancing to over there. Yeah, Tom, we see you, Tom. We know you well, Tom. It's called blacking up. We've written books about it. It's called minstrelsy, love and theft. Read it. Eric Lott, Blackface Minstrelsy in the American Working Class. Your people, American working class, right? Y'all became Americans, what, about a century and a half ago, when your people came here, Germany, Ireland, Scandinavia, you mixed in some kind of way. Maybe you're channeling your Catholic side from the Irish side. But either way, it doesn't matter. You've assimilated, but part of that assimilation is the love-hate relationship you have with Africans. Because you hate us, you love us. You know what I'm talking about, Tom. But the United States remains a contested social structure. All these things are here fighting each other. Remember, Ilhan Omar is sent to Congress every 2 years by a congressional district that is overwhelmingly non-Black, non-Somali. So The People's Republic of Brooklyn isn't Brooklyn. The People's Republic of Minnesota, Tom, is indeed that when it comes to Ilhan Omar, but you don't like Ilhan Omar. You want to go back where she came from. Why don't you go back where you came from? You gonna join the Irish Republican Army? You're gonna be on the other side? You're gonna go back to Germany where the Alliance for Democracy is bleeding some of the same racist talking points you're bleeding? You want to go back? You start talking about going back, you got to restore the land then to the indigenous people in Minnesota, one of whom has got so many different nations in Minnesota. They could be there, huh? Maybe you could do that. You don't want to do that because you believe in settler violence. It's part of your definition of patriotism. It's the same muscular patriotism. You say you ain't going to be polite no more. You want to be on the aggressive side, like Eric Prince in Blackwater, huh? He's in Africa doing his damage, and you want to be here in the streets of Minneapolis, St. Paul doing your damage, huh? You want to kill another Alex Preddy? You want to kill another Renee Nicole Good? You want to do that, huh? You in your heart of hearts, or you can't say that, can you, huh? So you got Bozo to say it for you, because you know in your heart of hearts you would say that if you was up to it. But since you can't do it with your bird chest, you go get this orange clown to say it with his molting orange one. And then you want us all to bow down on white Juneteenth and reinforce the lie that it was our founding fathers in their dream, as they, many of them deists, historically founded America as a Christian nation. I ain't arguing with you. Life's too short. Eddie and them might argue with you because they're going to brilliantly deconstruct you. I'm in an Africana Studies framework. Self-determination is my center. And as a result of that being the case, I understand that I'm not going to center spaces where others are merely tolerated by a degree of submission to your lie. I'm too busy rediscovering myself, doing the research, which includes discovering you too, but doesn't center it. My life does not exist as a figment of your imagination, my friend, and none of ours should. That's what scares the hell out of you. The people that can walk away from your lie, and when you put your hand on their shoulder to turn them around to try to stop you, simply turn back around and walk away because you're too weak to stop them. That is the point, my friend. Rituals such as a 250th U.S. anniversary, the so-called celebration that's coming up next week where we really tie this and bring this home, these consistently reinforce founding violence as superior. As superior. In other words, yes, it was violent, but it was necessary, because look at where we are now. You got to break some eggs to make some omelets. The omelet called United States required egg breaking, and now Joseph Ellis wants to rethink his whole life. And Gerald Horne is like, come on, take a few more steps. I wish you'd go a little further, but you came away. That's right. Gerald is being generous, and I'm right with him. I haven't read Ellis's book yet, but I will. Remember, Joseph Ellis got in trouble about lying about the Vietnam War and stuff like that. Remember, the guy who wrote Founding Brothers on the so-called founding fathers. Ellis got to come. It's funny how you get older and you want to absolve yourself. Something very Christian about that, I suppose. I don't know. But these celebrations reinforce these founding violences as superior, and they too frequently mask and reinforce the systemic harms. We just passed, talk about 150th anniversaries. We just passed the 150th anniversary on June the 25th, 1876 of Little Bighorn, George Armstrong Custer, U.S. military hero in the Civil War, who then went out there to kill the Native Americans, and they gave him that work. There's several books, and I think all of mine on the subject are in storage now. Every time I think about a book that I want to pull, I look around like it's on one of these 12, 13 bookshelves in here, or the other ones in there and there and in the back, but it's probably in storage. The story of Little Bighorn told through the indigenous people, the Lakota people. There's been books written about it. The history passed from mouth to ear, and then some people put a sliver of it in print. So very quietly, many people here probably didn't mark it, didn't know, but you know Little Bighorn, because that story is told very differently when you tell it from the U.S. Patriot side. Was a massacre? The savages, the Indians killed, they scalped, and Custer. Yeah, but you came to my house trying to take my house. So when I sent you to your ancestors, that was an act of self-defense. It's told very different in what they call Indian country in the social structure rendering, or the nations, the indigenous people in a governance ritual, in a governance language. So rituals such as this 250th celebration, they consistently reinforce these founding violences as superior, and they too frequently mask or reinforce systemic harms. So that rather than rely on these exclusionary definitions of belonging, who belongs? No, I'm going to tell you who doesn't belong. Emma is telling you who doesn't belong. No, can everybody belong? Senator Schmidt said if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. I could go along with that. Sure, that means it's for nobody. I said they remaking the Odyssey, right? And they made the Iliad and the Odyssey. So maybe it's the Iliad, but which one was it? It was the Odyssey, right? Where they encountered the Cyclops and they blind the Cyclops, and then when the people come up and say, "Hey, what happened to you? Who poked your eye? Who blinded you?" And he says, "Nobody." Why? Because I guess it was the hero said, Odysseus is like, "Nobody blinded you. Tell them nobody blinded you." I mean, a little joke or whatever. But my point is this: if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. I'll go along with that. Senator Schmidt, Senator White Nationalist out of Missouri. It's for nobody. Then I'm comfortable with it being for nobody. Because I don't care about your funky flag, that blood drenched flag. So these exclusionary definitions of belonging, rather than anchor them, or legalistic metrics of eligibility. Who is eligible for restitution? Who is eligible for compensation? Reparations involves restitution. It involves compensation, but internal repair comes from you. So to narrow who's eligible for it, that threatens, if we're talking about African people, that threatens to narrow the definition of who belongs in community among African people. And that's a problem. So what we're doing this week, what we've done every week, what we do in this corridor specifically, last week, this week, and next week, which when we finish next week will be a three-part kind of congealed, or not congealed, yes, congealed in a sense, but three-part meditation on this question of belonging, this question of liberation in this so-called liberation corridor setting, because it's the 250th moment of marking white Juneteenth, giving us a kind of level set so that next year and in subsequent years, we can continue to expand and move backward and forward in kind of enhancing, changing, adapting, moving forward to think about how we imagine and how we act differently in a world with different rituals that don't center that trauma, don't center that violence. This is our continuing work of reclaiming self-determining expression. We are prioritizing internal self-restoration, internal or self-restoration, healing, and building this international solidarity. That's going to be important too, in international solidarity. Let's talk about that for a minute. These questions of Black patriotism that we're going to talk about more of that next week, and I'm kind of begin to wrap this up in a few minutes, but I'm thinking about this in terms of these ritual moments. This is the 250th, so it gives us a moment of attention to think together, to be provoked to think, to prod ourselves to think. The Black positions on the 250th, some of them are in these magazines. Some of these are in the books. It's a lot of different books. Here are a few more that have come out. This one just came. This is Harper's. Twilight's last gleaming, an exhausted America turns 250. Christopher Hooks crashes the nation's birthday party. William Vollman, field strips to Constitution. Thomas Frank, the spirit of 1976. He's talking about that same 200th anniversary Eddie's talking about. Yeah, here it is. I had it over here. Here's The Economist. The Economist takes it global. So this is for June 13th through the 19th. This is not the most recent one. But what it does is it gestures toward that, because it's going to miss that one in the 2-week window. So the 250th they have, and by the way, the cover story is international, right? It's a World Cup paradox, the global fragmentation of fun. Interesting. See everybody on their devices instead of playing soccer. This is the small essay in The Economist. The road trip solution. The best way to celebrate America's birthday is to get behind the wheel. You ain't lying. Listen, I'm going to tell y'all right now, as I said, I mentioned what's going on here today, the next 250 rally. So Sister Carmen, Sister Tiffany Dina Lofton, they're bringing together a bunch of other people, a whole lot of folks to come to the district. They're going to be at McPherson Square this morning. Then they're going to march to the White House and back. It's not confrontational, though. You're safe. If you want to come, you should come. If you go to the Sirius XM app, you'll hear Lamont and I in conversation with Tiffany yesterday for about 20 minutes as she walked us through it. But I'm saying all that to say that Bozo has his, Tiffany was talking about this yesterday. She said she went for a run. She's a 6-mile run, but part of the reason she went 6 miles because she couldn't get around the National Mall. She had to go way out of her way down to the National Museum of African American History and Culture to come back this way because they got the stuff blocked off. I will bear witness to that at some point between now and next weekend. I'm gonna go down there myself in a reconnaissance effort because I believe in intellectual CSI. That's what I do. One of the things I do, crime scene investigation. So I'm gonna go look at the state fair where all the vendors ain't there and the booths are empty and the hillbilly horde ain't a lot of them there because times is hard. Temporary layoffs, good times, easy credit ripoffs, good times. Ain't we lucky we got them? You can take that song and apply it to you. But at any rate, but she's talking about it because the idea, imagine if Vice President Kamala Harris had won the election, the federal election in 2024. Imagine what would be going on in the District of Columbia right now. Oh, all these people who are writing in Harper's and in The Nation and The Economist in Dissent, which I'll talk about in a minute, journal, they'd be here at symposia and outdoors. It'd be incredible. The Smithsonian had already planned to do more along the lines of what the writer in The Economist is saying, which is push the stuff that might be located in Washington, D.C. for the 250th out to the rest of the country. So when Bozo came in and he just had lunch with Dr. Bunch, Lonnie Bunch, a few days ago, it was reported, he's still picking with Lonnie Bunch at the Smithsonian. But they had already Trump-proofed it before Trump came in. So they got stuff going on around the country, although they've cut many budgets. We see the harm they've already imposed. This is one of the reasons why you had to have this rolling furlough down at the museum, the new International Museum, African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. This is one of the reasons why they lost funding at the National African American Museum and Cultural Center in Wilberforce, Ohio, where we go every year for the Martin Delaney rituals with Larry and Olabisi and everybody down there in Dayton and in Xenia and all the surrounding areas. So they've had to cut back on a lot of things that are going on, but they had already decided to take it on the road. This is what the op-ed article says in The Economist. It says one stereotype held by foreigners about Americans is that they are irritatingly upbeat. Picture a stranger ordering you to have a nice day or a family declaring everything to be so great while exploring a drizzly, midge-infested Scottish ruin. There's only one nationality they could possibly be. This cliche is misleading, though. Americans are generally cheerful, but even in the country's brightest moments, many of them have been struck by a kind of dread about it all unraveling. Democracy never lasts long, wrote the second president, John Adams, in 1814, since I name-checked his wife, might as well put him in too, right? It soon wastes, he wrote, exhausts and murders itself, end quote. That sentiment is widespread as the country turns 250. America's feeling nostalgic as well as pessimistic on its semi-quincentennial. In the country that has been inventing the future since 1776, nearly half of the population say they would rather live in the past. Tom Emmer. Most young Americans do not expect to be better off than their parents. Meanwhile, on many objective measures, the country is doing better than ever. After a dip caused by opioid overdoses and COVID-19, that's all, life expectancy is back to the highest level in history. Boy, you better disaggregate that data by race. The economy has been growing robustly, unlike in other Western countries. Income inequality after taxes is lower than it was a decade ago. Really? Yeah. From nothing to less than nothing. American firms are preeminent in artificial intelligence. You better ask Chinese. Biomedicine, entertainment, and space technology. The Kennedy Center is getting its name back. Come on. After they've destroyed the budget and people ain't coming back no time soon. Taking the name down is cute. But look at the budget. Look at the hollowing out of the programs. I used to go down to Kennedy Center all the time. If this were regular time, no, I won't say regular time. If Harris was president, I'd probably been down there half dozen times between March and now to see incredible performances, whether it be Jason Moran or The Roots, whether it be Rakim or James Reese Europe retrospective, or a new suite introduced by my friend and brother Nick Payton, remixing Louis Armstrong. Oh my God, the things I've seen at the Kennedy Center. All them people ain't coming back no time soon. Come on, man. The distance between the data and the vibes is the central puzzle of the United States in the 2020s. Exploring what was the impulse behind the making of a new podcast we are launching this week to celebrate this spectacular country on its big birthday. Oh, these British. The 6-part series is a road trip in the company of Alexis de Tocqueville. This is what they're doing. They're going back to democracy in America, a French aristocrat who loved the place and who wrote a prescient book about it in the 1830s, Democracy in America. This road trip took the economist from New York's aristocracy to a maximum security prison in the Hudson Valley. From a fight over a data center in rural Michigan to Harvard University. Shout out to Yale University, who just bent the knee to Trump, trying to negotiate with them on the front page of the New York Times. It's a story today because of they're assaulting them over diversity programs, so they're going to try to bend the knee to them. And from a sheriff's office in Ohio to Donald Trump's court in Palm Beach, via plenty of other places. Wherever possible, we spoke with the same sorts of people Tocqueville did to compare America then and now. What, did you talk to the black people? Okay, so that's what they're doing in The Economist, right? Reminds me in Democracy in America of the vignette when Tocqueville is talking to white people, I think it's Pennsylvania, and he's asking them, well, if you have Negroes, colored people, you have Negroes there that don't vote, but they are eligible to vote, they have the right to vote, why don't they vote? And the white man tells Tocqueville, well, they don't vote because they choose not to vote. Boy, I hope The Economists don't replicate the people that Tocqueville taught. Well, we'll see. I'll listen to part of the podcast, although I would prefer to read it because I don't necessarily need that voice interfering in my eyes, trying to process what you wrote. And this is Dissent. Fine. This is the last one I'll show today, and then we'll do some more next week. Dissent, this is their new edition, America at 250. You see the good sister Idam Getachew, New Declarations, Aziz Rana, The American Revolution and Global Retreat, David Bateman and Julie Suk, Rot and Reform, and Jeffrey Isaac, What to Eugene Debs? Remember that presidential candidate? He's a socialist. Yeah, he was a socialist. What to Eugene Debs was the 4th of July. This is radical. So it goes across the spectrum. But my point is, in this moment, everybody is attempting to either contribute to or speak for as many people as possible on questions of collective identity and objectives, of individual takes on this criminal enterprise. But the moment reveals that there are countless, that's just a few of them, there are countless frameworks, countless opinions, and no solidifying identities that translate into mass power. You got to go out there and fight for it. It's like these people saying, hey, man, whatever, between Jasmine Crockett, and James Tallarico in Texas running this Senate campaign was so acrimonious. Y'all got to come, Tallarico got to come make the case. Did you know who Ken Paxton is? Are y'all that stupid? Okay, I apologize. Generosity. Let us agree to agree. Level set. For me, Greg Carr, if I were registered to vote in Texas, like my niece and nephew and brother and sister, you wouldn't have to come make the case to me, James Tallarico. You ain't never got to talk to me. But I know that there are some people for whom that will be the thing that determines whether you vote or not. So please, for those of you who are Christians, for Christ's sake, even though Jesus Christ never voted in the election, as far as I can tell, please understand, maybe start with Ken Paxton and work your way back to James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett. Or not. Because see, what I understand is that empires rise and fall, states come and go. And if you don't want to do it the easier way through the political violence of the ballot box, be prepared to do it the other way. Just be prepared. That's all. And if you find yourself on a battlefield, if you find yourself in a police station, if you find yourself in a holding cell or in handcuffs, please understand when you cry for help, that help might be received by people who might think before they think anything else, this could have been prevented by you doing just one different thing. But let's just think about that. These moments of thinking about what it means to belong to a community and engage in a liberation struggle, the moment reveals that there are countless frameworks and opinion, and there's no solidifying identity that translates into mass power. Each of us has to do our part. It isn't natural. So all I'm saying is that for those who engage in political education, I think about Aya Nelly every week in her show, Rethinking Freedom, that she broadcasts, bringing in local elected officials, national figures, writers, thinkers, fighting a good fight with that little radio station there, near Killeen, Texas, broadcasting to the world. That is an important element. We all have to do our fight. We're walking communities, signing petitions, getting people registered to vote, getting people out to the polls. I understand. I don't know James Tallarico. I ain't never met him. Maybe I will one day. Maybe I won't. I don't know Jasmine Crockett. Have met her a couple of times, been in spaces with her, brief conversations, beautiful sister, powerful sister, ain't going nowhere. Going to work 10 toes down all the way. Ken Paxton is the issue, my friends, in this moment. And if you don't think he is, then fine. Sit with somebody who can help you come to some consensus, but don't come in the room like my nose, I'm going to cut it off to spite my face. And I'm going to cut yours off too while I'm cutting. Generosity. Understand, look at this week's election cycles. More and more people pushing back against this white nativist narrative, this capitalist narrative, are understanding something that it takes a step of maturity to understand. These major political parties in the United States of America, the Democratic Party, Republican Party, they are delivery systems for acquiring power to get access to resources to change things for what you want. The white nationalists understand that. They have captured the Republican Party. They used to be in the Democratic Party. They moved to the Republican Party, which we don't call the Republican Party. That's the delivery system. The white nationalists have occupied the Republican Party. The MAGA Muppet out of Louisiana, the little congressman from his little district, Mike Johnson, said this week, if these other people get control of the House of Representatives, they're going to investigate us. They're going to go after Trump and his family. He said, I'm the one protecting y'all from that. He came out and said, I'm the protection. He said it. This little man, I am the protection. They dropped all pretenses. Meanwhile, we're going to argue on whether or not to give them another vote in the Senate coming out of Texas. Capture the apparatus. Have the argument, have the knockdown, drag out fight after you've captured the apparatus. Look to New York. Look at what Zohran Mamdani's back candidates did this past week. Daraliza Avila Chevalier, that young sister, Afro-Dominican, defeating the head of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. That young sister, who is a graduate student, PhD student, CUNY. You know, people saying, oh my God, well, that's New York. It's not the rest of the country. Come on down to Philly. Chris Rabb going to Congress. Come on down to DC. Janice George going to be the mayor of this city. Go across the country and see people who are beginning to understand. We'll just capture the apparatus. Yes, New York is not Nashville. Yes, DC is not Detroit. It's not Denver. It's not Dallas. However, the underlying sentiment, and believe me, they're using the science technology to talk to each other, whether it be on Zooms or emails or texts or group chats, whatever. Understand that we can seize the delivery system because we're not talking about a nation. We're talking about a country. We're talking about a state with many nations in it, a country with many nations in it. And you can organize for power the same way. Them people in the 13 colonies didn't agree with each other. And I'm talking about white people. The Africans did agree with each other on one thing. I ain't trying to be a slave no more, which is why when the British made overtures to them to free them, if they fought, even though they reneged on many of those promises, they went with the British, which is why it cracks me up anytime people start talking about our founding fathers resisted the British. No, your parents were with the British, many of them. We'll come back to that another time. We've talked about it many times. But this week, when we see the United States Supreme Court, these rulings on temporary protected status, I encourage you to read those opinions. You don't have to be a lawyer or a law student or a law professor. You can listen or read summaries and then work your way very quietly, very patiently, very slowly in terms of reading. Have the computer open so that you can search for words you don't know. Do your research. And when you see Samuel Alito, whose racism has become so explicit that he don't even pretend anymore, you shouldn't make it that easy, Christian soldier, Mr. Fascist, Mr. Trenton. You shouldn't make it that easy for the dissents by Atlanta Kagan in the case of TPS, and in case with the Haitians, and in the case of Sotomayor replying to you in terms of protecting people who are trying to come to the United States, fleeing persecution in part because you have ginned up the persecution in the countries they're from. You shouldn't make it that easy for Supreme Court justices to point out your naked racism. In the case of TPS, in the temporary protected status case, it's very important to understand that what Alito did, writing for the majority, and then reading part of a summary of his opinion from the bench this week, what he did was evoke racial statutes to justify his decision, their decision, the MAGA 6, including the consensual manservant for Clarence Thomas. And Kagan pointed it out. You're going to use, evoke, in the case of this Hawaii gun rights case, was it the Hawaii gun rights case? Yeah, the black codes. And Justice Ketanji Oyeka Brown Jackson, writing a dissent, said, hold on, man. You can't just, when you cite history, cite part of history. You just gotta cite the whole thing, warts and all. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, okay, let me level set here. The temporary protected status cases that Samuel Alito wrote the opinion for the MAGA 6 on basically said that the federal government, the executive branch, has the right to exclude people from these countries without oversight from anywhere else, without congressional oversight, without judicial review, in a sense. And so the dissent was like, yeah, but in order to do that, the administration, Homeland Security, Border Patrol, Border Protection, they have to investigate whether or not to change the status of a country from which people are being received and receiving temporary protected status, which, by the way, doesn't have a cap on it in terms of how long you can stay here. It has to be renewed, it has to be reviewed. What the dissent was that you didn't even review it. And Mr. Alito and friends, y'all didn't even take seriously the racial animus that animated this, taking their status away from them. Look at what this racist said about the Haitians. They're eating the dogs. You know what that clown said, Samuel Alito? Exquisite racist, Christian race soldier racist. This is what he said. I'm dropping all pretenses. This MF wrote in the paper, wrote in his opinion, and they all with it. Well, it's not direct evidence of racial animus. That's like Emmer saying it's not racist. So in the dissent, they write, well, what is direct evidence other than you said Haiti's an asshole country? You said, why can't we have more people from Scandinavian countries, Norway and Denmark? In fact, this is what Kagan writes in her dissent. She says, the people from those countries, he said, you wanted more people from, Trump said that, they don't tend to not be white. I mean, she was being polite. Although if you watch the World Cup, you will find in all them countries, black people. Why? Because they playing in the World Cup. I'm looking at Sweden. Like, they got all these black players. Sweden, was it Sweden? Yeah, last week, Sweden plays Japan. I think they were in Dallas. And I was watching it on the screen, one of these places, as I'm coming home. I'm like, and I'm saying, okay, look at all these black players on Sweden. Then they kick at the goal, and the goalie blocks a shot for Japan. Why was he a black dude? My point is that, so when Kagan said, these people tend not to be, I get that's hedging your bets here, because there's plenty of black people there, and many of them, obviously for obvious reasons. But Alito is like, eating the dogs, eating the cats in whole countries. That's not evidence. That's not direct evidence. Alito, you're a racist. You right now somewhere on somebody's boat, or maybe at your house with the upside down flag flying, your wife puts up, that you put your wife, I bet you was right there when y'all raised it up, because July 4th's coming and you got to celebrate the fact that you assimilated. When y'all read that Revenge for the 60s book I talked to y'all about a month and a half ago, and Alito, born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey, Italian, very proud, mad because they took the Columbus statue down during the reckoning period of 2020 when George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery were killed. He's still mad. He wants revenge for the 60s, and now he got the number he can count, and he's running his Boston. That was the TPS cases. In the case of the immigrants coming here, the idea that Alito, writing for the majority, said they didn't make it here because they never crossed the border. And then Sotomayor reminds him in the dissent, the reason they didn't cross the border is because your people stopped them in their attempt. And we understand that they were intending to come here, and that protection, that seeking asylum, that seeking refuge should extend to them, because they had every intent to come here, and they would have been able to come here to have their attempt processed had you not stopped them. And she makes the analogy to the ship with about 900 and some Jews. That ship that couldn't find a port in 1939, that was turned away from the United States of America in New York. That ship that went back, and of those 900 or so human souls, over a quarter of them, 250 plus, lost their lives in the Holocaust, the German Holocaust. Sonia Sotomayor, yeah, she went there in her descent. And then she quotes and she says, turn back the ships, because that's what you did to them. And that's what you're doing to these people. And she was so clear in reading the summary of her dissent from the bench that it pissed the Christian soldier off. And the court reporters read SCOTUS blog, SCOTUS, SCOTUS blog, where the reporter, one of the reporters in the court that day says, I went there, they're reading, Alito read from him, and then Sonia some more read her dissent. And then Alito, I'm saying like he's taking notes. And then Alito replies. And the reporters were like, okay, he read his. Okay, she read hers. Okay. And then he replied, and they're like, he said, I looked up, everybody looked up. But that don't happen. Alito was so hit dogs. It was a hit dog holler. Wasn't it, Trenton? Trenton makes the world takes. Yeah, the world's taking your racism long enough, friend. You're getting long in it too. Getting old. The political violence of the ballot box. You better get in there and use that gun of your ballot. Because that boy right there, Alito, and his little friend, the consensual manservant of white supremacy, Clarence Thomas Gullah Geechee, who has betrayed his own people and his own roots, them two probably coming off the bench. After these midterms, if you can win the Senate, you can stop that. You ain't got to confirm nothing that Bozo puts up between now and 2028. But if you play around, send Ken Paxton to Texas. If you send Ken Paxton from Texas to the federal legislature in the United States Senate and not Tallarico because you mad about a primary and they get the majority and they put some 32-year-old white nationalist, some Nazi adjacent clown on the Supreme Court because they couldn't stop him, I want you to have a conversation with me because I promise you I won't drag you for filth. I'm just going to ask you to tell us all why you prefer a white nationalist Supreme Court with somebody who won't be there for 50 years. I want to hear it. And I want us all to hear the same thing. If you're mad, let's talk about it. Come on in, office hours. There's thousands of people in Nubia now. The numbers grow every day. Come on in to Nubia. Coming into Knarrative. Come into Nubia. We had a conversation. Or better yet, call us on Sirius XM. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We can talk about it. I want to talk about it because I really want to understand the thinking. But I'm saying that's where we are now. The political violence you can engage in the ballot box can neutralize much of this, but it's going to require, as John Henry Clark said, don't get mad, get smart. I would amend that slightly or maybe offer a different way of saying it. Get mad and be smart about your anger. Embrace the anger, but don't allow the anger to blind you to the tactic, to the strategy. So in this Hawaii gun case, Alito presses Africans into service again, evoking the black codes. And I'm thinking to myself to overturn the gun law in Hawaii. And I'm thinking, is this a preview for birthright citizenship, which is going to come down next week or maybe the week after? It's almost like they're trolling us now. Will they release the birthright citizenship opinion on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday? Or will they wait till Thursday? Either way, I promise you this. I'm going to talk about that on Friday morning. Friday morning is July the 4th. Okay? No, July the 3rd. Saturday, July 4th. But Friday, a lot of people take off. We talked about it yesterday when we were in studio. Either way, when they release that opinion, Friday morning, you can tune in to Sirius XM channel 126 with Talking Powers Becomes Action, 7 to 10 a.m. And there will be a conversation about that opinion if they release it this week. I'm almost thinking it's the ultimate troll to do it on July 3rd. Maybe they'll do it on July 1st. We will see. But maybe there are some clues as to what they may or may not do. It should be open and shut. They should never have taken the case. But it should be open and shut. Every court in the country up into them is that, birthright citizenship is in the 14th Amendment. You're born here, you're a citizen. Some nut job legal law professor who I've talked about before comes up with a obtuse theory and y'all gonna push it through like it's gonna come, and the Supreme Court takes it. Are they taking it to take a jackhammer or chip away? Imagine chipping away at birthright citizenship. It's in the damn phrase. It's been reinforced. We've talked about it before. But are there clues in these cases where race is being used or ignored depending on the politics of the court, the MAGA 6? Well, maybe there's a hint as to how Alito may approach birthright citizenship and try to restrict it by saying, well, that was passed because black people coming out of slavery in the Civil War. I could see him doing it because he's so damn ahistorical when he gonna cherry pick the history. But like Ketanji Brown Jackson, like Justice Brown Jackson said to him, you can't just pick part of history. You should pick all, you must pick all the history. Alito's response to her in terms of writing is the equivalent of, I ain't gotta pick shit. I'll pick whatever history I want to pick. Huh? This goes back to the Garden of Eden. He'll even drop something. It don't matter. They're making it up. Also remember Amy Coney Barrett in the oral arguments to the birthright citizenship case. She pressed John Sauer. We talked about this. You can go back and look at it in class. She pressed him about birthright citizenship in the context of the Civil War, prior to the Civil War, and after the Civil War, when the Africans who Bauer wanted to make the claim it applied to primarily, which is the reason they put it there. He said, some of those people came directly from Africa. Weren't they subject to other jurisdictions? And they like to use the word potentates, African potentates, which cracks me up. Okay, so European potentates, whatever. But my point is that in that conversation, creating these relationships that potentially conflict with legal identity in the changing U.S. polity, I'm saying is Comey Barrett doesn't sound like she's going to come down on the side of undermining birthright citizenship. It should be 9-0 that birthright citizenship is in the 14th Amendment in the Constitution. End of story. We just took it to reinforce that. Could be 8-1. Alito might be the holdout. Thomas might be the holdout. At best, it might be 7-2 with Alito and Thomas, because I hope it's 7-2. Because I want to read what them two would do if they had the majority. But I'm not at all convinced that they won't chip away at it. But in order to do that, Comey Barrett gonna have to twist herself in the nuts. John Boy, Mr. Balls and Strikes Roberts. This ain't voting rights, John Boy. This is explicitly in the 14th Amendment. So if they overturn or chip away, rather, at birthright citizenship, which would mean overturning the concept, really, it's going to be a wonderful day in the United States of America. And it's going to be a terrible day in the United States of America. It's beautiful and terrible too. Beautiful and ugly too, to quote Langston Hughes. This again chips away at the notion that there is a common identity, not even a legal identity, which leads me to the last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here today. This attempt to restrict identity in a polity, in a country. This attempt in the United States that is in line with the attempts other places, including the places that Bozo and his clown car cabinet, his chain of fools, is promoting around the hemisphere, whether it be this clown they call El Tigre in Colombia. He had a long article on him. I think it's in the front section of the FT Weekend. Here he is. This circus clown, this guy with a house in Florida, the firebrand lawyer, has won the presidency and vowed to crush drug gangs like cockroaches. Colombia's new Trumpian tiger, this utter circus clown. Abelardo de la Espriella, this clown with his soccer jersey on. They're interfering all over the hemisphere. Here domestically, they want to shrink the notion of who belongs and who doesn't as a legal proposition. You little punk Stephen Miller, fear-driven bubblehead. I want to close by turning attention to my friends and comrades at Cobra. I want to thank them for a wonderful conference so far. This is the 2026 National Convention. See a lot of familiar faces there, a lot of ancestors of Mario Bedelli and Queen Mother Moore, John Conyers, Queen Mother Dorothy Benton, the great Hannibal Afrique, so many others, honoring the legacy, renewing our commitment, expanding our work. They were at the Howard University School of Law on yesterday and the day before. And I want to draw particular attention to this because there was a day-long plenary. After I left the radio station, I went over to this is what happened on Thursday. But this day-long plenary was the opening plenary. The opening plenary was a national conference of Black lawyers in Cobra and ADOS. And it's many other people, the kind of lineage-based arguments conversation. The discussion, who should be repaired for the oppression and repression during the period of enslavement and its continuing legacies. And when I tell you that those who made the case for lineage-based repair Dr. Kila Mukaram, Josh Gray, those who talked about specific harms and putting those harms, specific harms in specific countries in the context of global conversations, my friend Dr. Deborah Jackson, those who talked about, from the National Council of Black Lawyers, from those who talked about being beyond lineage and looking at global repair, whether it be my friend and sister Ajwa Ajitoro, my man Roger Wareham from the December 12th movement, and then strategic dialogue. The moderators were incredible. Omawale Setterwhite and my sister Kichi Taifa. It was really quite something to have this dialogue. And I want to say this before I say anything else. Yvette Carnell was there. We didn't get a chance to talk. I was in the sessions. She was in the sessions. It was like a 4.5 hour, almost 5 hour conversation, rotating, having conversations. It was very important to hear those conversations, to participate in them. And the ground rules came straight out of Mariba Kelsey. No disrespectful stuff. No. Let us agree to agree, really, to have at least these kind of ground rules where we respect each other and listen. I took a bunch of notes, as y'all can imagine. I mean, I can't show them to y'all because I didn't have my note cards, but I was taking notes. Y'all can't really see. Y'all see, I'm an outline note taker, so I take notes out on the outline form. So I'm sitting here writing my hand off. The goal really was to identify the injuries and tailor the remedies. What have been the injuries to African people and what are the remedies? And also, how do we prevent the repetition of harm? How do you stop the harm from repeating? This is major. How do we stop the bleeding? The legal remedies might differ depending on the context. That's a critical moment. You see, the lineage argument, which I absolutely think, in fact, given this current federal polity, particularly the Supreme Court, doomed to fail because they're going to use class as a proxy for race. Now, though, Deborah Jackson made an interesting observation. She was looking at specific harms to happen to specific people as it relates to violence during Reconstruction and after. And she said, for these, you can make these claims without having to use race because you see the harm, even though racial animus might be at the heart of the harm. It was fascinating to hear these legal conversations, but the legal remedies might differ depending on the context. This narrow focus on lineage, who was harmed where and who was descended from who was harmed where, need not be exclusionary if you pair it with a solidarity politics. If you want to pursue that, although I think it's doomed to failure in a U.S. context, if you want to pursue that and other people, other places of African descent want to pursue other things, and you can come together in coalition to strategize and coordinate where you can, then and pair it with a broader focus on human rights rather than civil and civic polity rights, citizenship rights, so to speak, in some ways, descendant rights in terms of harms in specific places, well, then that might work if the goal is unity. What is the harm? And how is the repair? This is where the language of eligibility to me becomes dangerous because that weaponizes our identity. It ties us to citizenship. And once you're tied to citizenship, it isn't just a legal bundle of rights you're after. You become part of a national polity. See, what Emner and them racists is talking about isn't just your legal rights. They want you as part of their spiritual and cultural community. And they want you in as a junior partner, as diminished human being, as somebody at the bottom of a pyramid. Only George Washington could be a citizen. His slaves can't. Only a judge can't be a citizen. If she gets the right to vote, she can vote, but she better vote the right way, which is what the U.S. Post Office tried to pull recently, this week. And the judge slapped him down on something Bozo signed last year where he said, you got to get a mail-in ballot, you got to show ID. Like, hell no. Nah. Now Bozo wants to, and the Postmaster General was on Capitol Hill this week talking about we ain't even going to deliver ballots from people. Oh, no, that's illegal. It's unconstitutional. But my point is your citizenship isn't just about your legal rights. It's a way they want you to vote. They even said it. I think it was the Postmaster General that said it this week. We want people who are voting the right way. The right way doesn't mean following the rules. The right way means like we vote. It's funny how they just saying it in your face now. But this multiracial democracy, Brother Gray, who I thought did an excellent job. He was also not Gray, Shaw. Gray was on the panel as well. Corey Shaw, Ward 7. Corey Shaw is one of the leaders in the DC chapter of NCOBRA. He's the male co-chair. Corey Shaw made some important points. He says, I'm working for a multiracial democracy. He's a black man working for a multiracial democracy in the United States. And at the same time that I'm working for that multiracial democracy, I understand that we cannot define our legal claims and our identities relative to external definitions. I'm saying, I hear you, Corey. Go ahead, brother. Because working for a multiracial democracy in the United States of America is a worthy goal. They've never had democracy anyway, but if you want to call it democracy, fine. Working for an inclusive polity, working for a U.S. polity that's together is a worthy goal as the creation of a system of protection against harm. Maybe even, to be really aspirational, as an aspiration to a different type of society. I'm not talking rhetorically now. I'm talking about what you do. Okay? But it must not be at the expense of one's personhood. You can't work for a multiracial, multi-cultural, inclusive space at the expense of you leaving part of yourself out as an individual, or leaving out your peoplehood, groups that you come from. That's what Tom Emmer wants. That's what he means by assimilation. He's engaged in a war against peoplehood, not individuals, but people, collective, not that Negro who was clapping tepidly sitting in that room full of Klan adjacent folk. He thinks, well, they won't throw me out. No, peoplehood, who you represent every time you show up, brother. Emner's assimilation is an attempt to impose his imagined community on everyone else. But these injuries should not, as Corey said Thursday, these injuries should not be bound by external definitions. How can somebody tell you how you've been injured? I observed that, in many ways, studies, that when you study, what that reveals, it reveals more about how you have been injured than narrative does. You can listen to stories, or you can say, how have I been here? When you're physically harmed, when you've been harmed, what's the first thing you do? You check yourself out to see how you were harmed. Well, how is that different when the group has been harmed? Slavery harmed us. Okay, who is the us? Did you check yourself out to see how you were harmed? Well, I'm praying to Jesus. Yeah. Is that a harm? Who were you praying to before they hit you with it? Oh, they ain't different than getting a cut on your arm or a ding on your forehead. Or, yeah, I'll sure let them hog maws. Was you eating that before they came? No. So that high blood pressure, that diabetes, okay, well, hold on now. Yeah, when you get hit, you check yourself out to see where you've been harmed. Imagine a community of people, a collective of people that didn't exist as a collective before they were harmed, who were put together by the harm. How have you been harmed? So thinking about this, I had a few questions. In a moment of world history, when there's an erosion of state borders and boundaries, and the attempted consolidation of state power by trans state actors, this guy, Blackwater Eric Prince, he's a trans state actor, meaning what? He acts in Congo, he acts in Haiti, he'd act in the United States on the streets. If you let him, and he did it before, he'll do it again as they weaponize this stuff and try to evict everybody from the country as they scurry around in the basements and attics, these bubble heads, as Stephen Miller scurries around, talks on TV, well, y'all, the people, New York City is 50% immigrant, so you have to be, okay. Come out here and say it with your full of bird-ass chest. No, you want Eric Prince and his mercenaries to join with your tissue paper, face-hiding ICE thugs and Border Patrol thugs, and you want to put people out of the country. Well, they are trans state actors. These are mercenaries, some of them. And in a moment when this is going on, what is the cost or value of isolationist or nativist projects? You're going to shrink your vision of human liberation to the four corners of the United States of America, and in a reparations claim, say that I am owed and you can't be owed because you didn't come through it here, when the whole world has been organized around race? The lineage argument is not automatically anti-African. That's not what I'm saying. There were also some folks there who argued that there's an Afro-Indigenous voice that must be included. In fact, they were making the case that to enter global dialogue, Africans in the diaspora have to have their own place to stand. I agree. Afro-Colombians, Afro-Venezuelans, in the case of the Caribbean, race rises to the level of country. So Jamaica or Haiti can come to the table. In the case of the United States, we ain't got no place to stand. as African people, we got to come in as people, United States of America. And so when Ghana comes out and makes their proposition and 100+ nations agree with it at the United Nations in terms of slavery being this grave crime, the United States puts its thumb down and we're hostages in the United States because we done shrunk our whole identity to citizenship. So when your master comes up and says, F you, we sitting there like, no. We can't hear you 12%. We can't hear you 14%. Okay, we include the Afro Latinos. We can't hear you 30%. Yeah. So what would that look like? A voice in a formal polity, a formal structure. Would it be stateless society? Ooh, they would raise hell. Would it be observer status? Would you give Africans in the United States the same status you give to Palestinians? Because Palestinians got observer status at the UN. Malcolm X was moving in that direction. One of the reasons his voice had to be silenced. I'm going to bring him up to the United Nations. Remember Du Bois. Remember Paul Robeson. Remember S.E. Robeson. Remember Shirley Graham Du Bois and Alphaeus Hunting and Dorothy Hunting. We're going to go, we charge genocide. You don't have a status in the United States. And then you get a criminal enterprise like FIFA, and I was talking about on the radio. I may even mention this next week as we culminate. Let me see if I have the book here. It's a small book, and I don't think I brought, no. Oh, wait, here. It's in my bag. It's a very interesting book. It's called Red Card. You see that? Red Card. Red Card, the 2026 World Cup, sports washing, and the FIFA greed machine. Jules Boykoff. Dave Zirin, my friend Dave Zirin, the sports editor at The Nation, wrote the foreword. But he's talking about FIFA, this international criminal enterprise organization. We all watching the World Cup. Here come the Haitians. They got the Battle of Vertier on their uniform, as I talked about last week. People say, y'all can't do that. That's too political. You ain't nothing but a criminal enterprise. You made up a whole ass peace prize for Bozo so that you could grease the slats for him. You won't let the Iranians come in and out of the United States and spend the night. They eased up on that because the world is going on. But my point is that this lineage argument, that if it ties itself exclusively to the United States, this is a problem. Why shrink your identity in a world where everybody is expanding their identity who are fighting for power? What makes the lineage argument anti-African isn't the harm-specific argument. It's not it. It's the element of exclusion. The emphasis on not working in solidarity. That isn't everybody in that case. Listening to brothers and sisters talking this week at the Incoba conference, there are many people saying, no, I'm looking at the harm that happened to me. I'm looking at the harm that happened to my grandparents, my great-grandparents, people. Okay, I get it. I'm not diminishing the harm that happened to other places. We should work in solidarity. Okay, I don't agree. I think it should be a Pan-African approach completely with absolute recognition of the specific harm, but I think that solidarity has to be more than we're all together. It has to be strategic. It has to be legal. You can put pressure on the United States from the United Nations in a different way. That's what we're reading about in the Second Emancipation with Kwame Nkrumah. This was the thing that scared the hell out of the white power structure globally, was that Africans would unite. It's very important to understand, but I do understand the harm that happens specifically. Are you kidding? I understand it better than most. I can enumerate it better than most. And so it's important to understand that shouldn't freeze us. The anchoring of political identity with discrete polities is a challenge for me. Somebody said Black people in the United States is no longer going to be Black tofu. Everybody else gets to come here and have their identity. We need our identity. Who is saying you don't have an identity? My friend, Dr. Bernie Garman, our brother Bernie Garman, has written about, he calls it AUSA, Africans in the United States of America. That's the term he uses. Nobody's saying that there isn't a unique identity, a unique set of experiences that are distinct from each other, depending on region and context. But together, we are all Africans. Are we not all Africans? What Bernie says, Africans of the United States of America. It's an important moment. The question here is, what is the value proposition of political identity in the United States in a racial state to the exclusion of potential solidarity with other Africans in a trans state formation? Hell, if Blackwater can go steal your stuff in Congo and oppress you in Haiti and sit up in Washington, D.C. or in Northern Virginia and get your tax dollars to do it, then why in the hell would you cut yourself off from Africans everywhere else to break their political backs? They're trans state, we're trans state. All one has to do is understand the potential power in trans state actors. All you got to do to understand that is to understand the reaction to white countries when you even talk about it. This is what we're reading about in the Second Emancipation. What is the thing that cannot be repaid, y'all? That has to be healed from within. Not restitution for injury, not restitution for theft, but healed through self-restoration. What is that self that is in need of healing? Is it something torn and new, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o would say? when Ngugi would talk about the decolonization of modernity, does that mean that the current states that we occupy, these modern states, these lines that were drawn, must out of necessity of their framework become multinational? Remember what we read in French's book. Hold on for a second, because I think my headphone's about to die, which means it's another signal.
We can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you. All right, I'm about to wrap this up. This is either all the signs to stop. But what does it mean? Remember when we read in the Second Emancipation, when they were on the birth of Ghana in 1955, 56, and the Ashantis are like, well, we the major power holders in the Gold Coast, so we either want to separate or create a federal constitution. They appeal to the damn Queen of England, do that. And Nkrumah's like, no, we all gonna be together. But what does it mean to be a Ghanaian? There wasn't no Ghanaians before. If y'all had joined with us when the British showed up, we could have beat them back and we wouldn't even be in this mess. Well, that takes an added significance. And in fact, I won't talk about it today. Maybe I'll talk about it next week. Because Nkechi and them just came back, Zizwe Poe and others, just came back from Ghana, where they had the follow-up meeting to the resolution that Mahama introduced at the UN a couple of months ago that everybody jumped on and supported. And they had the follow-up meeting in terms of creating this document to guide how we move forward in terms of solidarity. That's the modern world had all these lines. So what does it mean to have a multinational state? That means in Africa too, Nigeria and Ghana. It means having a multinational state, Ethiopia, a multinational state, Democratic Republic of Congo or Congo. It's important to have those things. So I guess what I'm saying is that as we think about this in this liberation corridor, we set our agenda through dialogue. We're virtual right now, thinking about science and technology, our conceptual categories. The level setting of virtual convenings is important. And it's also important to tie those things to physical convenings. This is why Tiffany Lofton and them are having this next 250. What does the next 250 years of the United States look like downtown today? They said we got to be in person, even though they organized it virtually. We got to be in person so that we can see life to life. And then can we refine these protocols and deepen these protocols? Yes, we can. Virtual intellectual work, like what we're doing, creates shared spaces, even as it enhances individual reflection. These observations are very important for us to do. Shout out to my people, my Philadelphia Freedom Schools folk. We had the training at Lincoln University last week. Shout out to Kelly Sparrow Mickens and all the folks. You know, my Maisha Sullivan, sister, her daughter, who is leading a lot of this. This is very important for us to have these conveniences because, you know, and now we've got Sharif El-Mekki coming online, Ashray Hines and them. Those freedom schools are about to be up and running. I'll be up and down between DC and Philly for the rest of the summer until we leave for Kemet. And I got a chance to spend, shout out to Sister Raquel, who is the archivist at Lincoln University, got a chance to actually see and touch Langston Hughes' personal library, which is at the Langston Hughes Library at Lincoln University. Go through the archive, see books that were left to them by a famous graduate of Lincoln University, Kwame Nkrumah. I'll show one on Monday night, a picture of one that is autographed by him at Lincoln. And just being on that campus and being in that space and being with those teenagers, those young people, the same week that we started summer school at Howard with our incoming student athletes. Shout out to Coach Ty, the women's basketball coach at Howard, and my man, Brother Kenny, who is the men's basketball coach, KB, the men's basketball coach at Howard, for having all their first year students be with us, and the football team as well, Ted White's boys with Howard football team. And then in the afternoon, we have the STEM students and the humanities and social sciences students, about 70 of them. Shout out to my man, Ron Smith, in dialogue with young people all throughout that process, high school, college, and most importantly, centering everybody here, which is the center for me now and for the rest of my life, one way or another. It's a reinforcement that these virtual spaces that we have must be reinforced by the physical spaces that come together. They're going to try to bring a bunch of people here in Washington, D.C. Lonnie Bunch of them have already farmed it out to the provinces, and the revolution is going to come from the provinces. We got to undermine these social structures through global interference based on physical intervention, which is itself based on thinking work, which that part we can start virtually. So I'm going to pause for that for now. And next week, 250, we'll get into the meat of like what those steps look like.
Oh, so much work to do.
So much, so much work to do.
Well, thank you for today and every day. Thank you for the commitment. It never ends, you know, what you're going to be doing later on today as well. But you know, we have to live with purpose. This is not yelling into the void and shaking your fist at things. It's, you know, getting up and doing something every day. Yeah.
That's right. Every day. Oh, let me mention. Don't go anywhere. I just want to mention this because I mentioned the Alexander Crummell School. We know there's going to be a new mayor in Washington. It's going to be Janice George, brilliant young sister in her 30s. I mean, just hard working. And shout out to everybody who ran against her too. Kenny McDuffie is a friend. He got the reparations bill through the city council. So I mean, these aren't enemies. You know what I'm saying? It's just that we can.
Say, can we? You know, I interviewed Menifee, who beat Al Green, and it was his district, and he's like, I'm not gonna say anything negative about Al Green. We're not enemies. When we can get to that place where, all right, I lost to you or you beat me or whatever, I beat you, but let's, you know, we have the shared goal, which is to serve these people. You know, New York, similar, you know, it's interesting watching Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic establishment. And I still want to understand why Letitia James is like I was like, I don't know what that is. But y'all on the same side, aren't you?
You know what it is. You know what it is. Money talks. That ain't Tish James. That ain't Hakeem Jeffries. They're a very powerful interest. Hey, man, if you want to keep getting this money, or if you want to keep you better get up and say something.
But even that, right? They showed that money wasn't the key. It was the getting in front of the people. So you're telling me you're not willing to work to get people's votes? You rather just get that money and suppress votes, because that money suppresses votes. Actually, it makes people not want to show up. So you're telling me you rather that than having 1 million more people participate?
Well, I think I would give them the benefit of the doubt, and I know that people will probably jump on me and jump on you too if you said the same thing. I would say that no, they don't prefer that, but I think that the more we get involved, the more it takes the pressure off of them to do that. You know what I'm saying? Because remember, before, I mean, when they sent all that, when the CBC went out there and interfered with Nina Turner to get Shontel Brown, it's not like their politics was so different. But I think if that were today, I mean, remember, as we know, that whole critique of the Biden and then AIPAC and all that, and then Harris, that's more palpable today, not because people kept screaming into the void. I mean, Chris Van Hollen, which was fascinating to me. It's not Bernie Sanders. The guy who's running in Michigan, who may win the nomination for Senate. Okay, Dr. was El Fayed, I think is his name. You've got Bernie Sanders endorsed him. Okay, it's everywhere. Chris Van Hollen endorsed him. Like, whoa, this is something. The people have moved, which means now. So I think in the coming weeks and months, and Hakeem Jeffries, okay, if it's in your heart, this your chance, man. These people have gotten in the street enough to embolden you. Tish, you swore the man in. I think we're gonna see it. I hope, at least in Tish James, I would say.
This will determine a lot. And I was thinking about this as I was thinking about like Clinton's election and how the quote unquote Democrats moved to the right, you know, and it got, you know, tough on crime and all this other stuff. Politics, these D's and R's move based on how we move. And we get caught up in these, you know, designations as if they're static. They're not static. If we move them, they move. They move the way we move. We got to get up and move.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's all I wanted to say. And just contributing to exactly what you said. You know, politicians are personalities. You got to have big personality. You got to have, but if we're smart, we've tracked with the policy. And I wanted to mention that while Janice George, I'm looking at her like, okay, you become an avatar. You're somebody who really excites people. You're brilliant. You're young. The smoke that Mayor Muriel Bowser got, much of it was deserved. But I want to at least pause here and say that I stood there on Monday between classes. I had to rush and then get back because I wanted to be there at the Alexander Crummell School, one of the few schools in this country, entities named for him. Ivy City in DC, the hood, even though they're trying to gentrify it. That building, they wanted to tear it down. They wanted to make it a restaurant. They wanted to make it a bus depot. But the people of that community and across this city, Empower DC, I want to congratulate them, because every birthday I would come and speak at these things, say the Crummel School on his Saints Day. On Monday, the mayor of Washington, D.C., the current mayor, Muriel Bowser, cut the ribbon on a $35.5 million restoration of the Alexander Crummel Center for the community. And she centered the children, the elders. They named all the ancestors, Sister Parisa, and they had a shirt with all the ancestors who have made transition over the 20 years they've been struggling for that center. Gail Fisher Stewart, a sister who was the interim rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. That's the Black Episcopal District, that church founded by Alexander Crummel in 1879. We were standing there, and I just want to tell you exactly what you said. When the people come together, you make politicians do whatever the hell. Right. I think Muriel Bowser wanted to do it, but guess what? These real estate developers, these money people, they own her. The thing that allowed them to cut the ribbon on that was that all them people got together and said, well, whatever's in your heart, Mayor Bowser, we got more people than they got money, damn it. So we're going to put this steel in your spine. And they cut the ribbon on it. That's just, I just want to mention that for those people.
I mean, that's important. Data centers. Hello. Yeah. All we got to do is show up for one another, show up for ourselves. Damn. Not even for one another. Yeah, it's not rocket science. We could do this.
It's not rocket. Yeah. Love you.
Love you too.
Love you. If y'all be safe, I will see y'all this week.
All right. Bye, Dr. Carr. Bye, everyone.